The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The human postponer. They were the master of one phrase. I'll circle back on that. But 3 months later, you were the one doing all their work and wondering how big that circle is. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can take the hiring load off your plate by automating the hiring busy work from the initial job post to scheduling interviews. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Welcome to the Southern U Podcast, brought to you by Darden Archery on the Okayest Podcast Network with your co-host, Matt Brock, Jeremy Ferguson, and Taylor McMurtry. If you're looking for all things land-related in the Southeast, you came to the right place. Whether it's real estate, habitat, wildlife, or just being outdoors, this is the place for you. Welcome to the Southern U.
All right, guys, we are here with Matt Brock, Andrew Green, Mike Williams, and myself with Habitat Network. We're doing a little live stream here, trying to get everybody together, more of the professional service providers together to talk about topics. And we're going to continue to do that, put out a little more well-rounded podcast series here over the next several months, trying to get a number of these PSPs that are on the network out in front of you guys so you can see from somebody else besides me and Matt.
Which I'm sure they probably want more of.
Oh, yeah. And you get more detailed information from other parts of the world. But today, or tonight rather, we're going to talk about what we as professionals go through and the steps that we go through initially for developing a game plan for a piece of property. And by that, I do not mean writing a management plan. This would be the steps that kind of come before that. And I know everybody's going to handle it a little bit differently. And in an effort to try to, I think our system works well enough here that we're not going to talk over and have spitting and sputtering amongst. But if something kind of goes awry and we lose one of you, just hop back on and we'll catch back up where we were. But I'll just leave it at this. I mean, everybody knows Matt and myself. We're here in North Alabama. But Andrew and Mike, if y'all will, we'll start with Andrew. Why don't you introduce yourself again, tell everybody where you are and exactly what it is that you do. And when Andrew's finished up, Mike, if you would do the same.
Yeah, I'm a registered forester and wildlife biologist over here in Central Arkansas. Pretty well work most of the state over into West Tennessee and West Mississippi. Kind of had my history. I started as in the world of moist soil and then kind of drifted over into the world of forestry and kind of found a love for that. And now that's, what I've been doing for the last 12 years or so, as far as either in the public sector or private sector.
Good deal. Mike?
Yeah, I'm Mike Williams. I'm down in southeast Alabama. I'm a wildlife biologist down here and on Native South Wildlife Management. We do habitat consultation, ecology consultation, prescribed fire management, and pretty much work North Florida, Alabama, Georgia. We burn in Alabama and Georgia, and was a federal wildlife biologist prior, and back in May last year, so May 2025, started this business. So just completed first full year of business. So glad to be here.
Wow.
How'd that first year go for you? Was it a Was it a struggle, or was it like drinking from a fire hose once people knew you were out there?
It was a fire hose, man. I think I didn't realize how much work there was out there. So it's been a good year.
Same
really
thing I've
deal.
said.
I didn't realize
Yeah.
we were that close together. I started in March of 2025, so
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all were tight right there. Brock, you've been what, 3 years now, or is it 4? 4.
I started. Yeah, I resigned from the state of Alabama in February of 22.
Okay. And
So it's been
and
over
I-
4 years.
Yeah, and I excitedly resigned in 19. So, but anyway, I was a short-term employee there anyway. I think for most people,
Yeah.
I think I had 5.5, 6 years in before I decided I need to make the jump and do something different.
I was smart enough to get vested first.
I didn't have the patience to stay another 4 or 5 years.
I get it.
And were you were tier 1 though, weren't you?
I was. I came in just a few days before they started tier 2. I was hired in December, and they started tier 1 or tier 2 in January.
So anybody that knows anything about the Alabama retirement system, I came in a tier 2 employee, and I was in my mid 30s. So if you know anything about that, I was going to have to work till I was 113 to get a good retirement. So I just went ahead and called it quits.
Yep.
But anyway, well, let's jump in. And we can round robin, or y'all can tackle it one at a time, or however we want to do this. I kind of know how I do things. I feel like I know how Brock does things, but I think he flies by the seat of his pants quite a bit.
Always.
But when you're called out on a piece of property, Mike and Andrew, what's the first questions you're asking a landowner?
He's muted.
Andrew, you muted.
well,
Yep.
what do you want? I run into so many landowners that I want to make my property better. Well, how do you what is the goal here? Are we talking whitetail? Are we talking ducks? Are we talking quail, turkey? Or a little bit of all of it. But before we can do anything, you need to have a goal.
Yeah. And you got to kind of be sure about those goals too.
And I can help you work through those goals and help you determine what's feasible, but you have to at least have some semblance of what do I want and what do I need out of this property.
Yeah. Mike, you seem to be, from what I can tell, watching you and the work products I see come out from you, like a lot of us, you seem to be very, very detail oriented. I am not at all. I'm a 30,000 foot guy, and I've always told people that. But because you seem to be down in the details, are you going deeper than that, or are you just trying to determine, like Andrew said, just a basic level of goals and then fine tune later?
Yeah, that, and then even higher than that is just where's the property located at, especially in a state like Alabama, where the variance in flora from where y'all are at up there, Matt and Jeremy, to where I may be at in the lower coastal plain in northern Florida is completely different. And so number one is just figure out where the property's at, and that it may be something that I go in and look at, all right, kind of where it's at, soil types, before I go to somebody's property, so I can kind of know what I may be getting into. And I know that's a high thing, but when you're managing across a state like Alabama, you run into all kind of different stuff. You got trees up there that we don't have in North Florida, Southeast Alabama. And so just thinking about it like that before I go out, I spend a decent amount of time thinking about what I might run into when I get there. And then, like he said, goals and objectives. I mean, they can be it can completely change the way you look at a property based on what you're managing for. So
Yeah. It sounds like it's a lot like real estate. Location, location, location.
yeah, especially in Alabama, man.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Arkansas the same way. I've got clients at up in the rocks. I've got clients with up in the rocks managing glades, and I got clients down here in the bottoms managing moist soil for waterfowl and the river bottoms. So
yeah. I know. I hate to keep saying I know Brock's answer, but I know what this one's going to be. But all of you, just for reference, if you had to put a percentage on what it is that you do, is deer number one in y'all's book, or are y'all finding that it's starting to trend other ways now?
Y'all go ahead.
I would say that deer are usually the driving force, but a lot of these landowners have secondary game species that they're trying to manage for as well. I've even had requests for non-game species. So I think that it really just depends on the client. But one of the first things that I try to do is identify the primary species that they're managing for, and get them to send me maps before I show up on site. That way I can kind of take a look at the forest types and stands that they have, hydrology, soil type, and then that gives me a better baseline understanding of what I'm dealing with when I show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still primarily deer, and I've got a lot of waterfowl guys being over here in Arkansas. We've got a lot of waterfowl, a lot of GTRs, got a lot of but I've also got some guys up in the mountains that we've got a great big quail project that I'm working with a landowner on right now, and they are hardcore mad about it, but they're gonna have a heck of a quail place in a few years.
Yeah, Drew, for everybody that don't know, a GTR.
It's a green tree reservoir. That's man-made, sometimes man-made, but artificially flooded impoundment for waterfowl, where we can control water levels and have a little more reliable water than just relying on the river floods.
Yeah. And boy, I have we've got some, but I have a new respect for you guys that do anything along rivers. I hate it.
Mm-hmm. Give me upland ground all day.
The soil is great. Those river bottoms will grow anything, but my gosh, when it gets wet, it's just wet. And there's not much you can do. I've got the one track that I really, really focus on here in Marshall County that's on the bank of the Tennessee River. And the water table is just so high, even in drought conditions. You get a big rain, and I mean, you're not down for days, you're down for weeks. And
July to October is when it happens here.
Yeah. And it's just it's a unique set of circumstances that I had never dealt with a whole lot in my background, being an upland pine, guy. But I'm learning now, by gosh, and I'm tired of it.
I know it's a little off the rocker from what we're talking about, but one of the things that with the GTRs, what so many of these GTRs, age of a stand is so important. And what I'm running into a lot of times is you've got water stress trees, and then you got these stands that are 80, 100-year-old stands that have never been touched other than to clean out a duck hole. And that's a problem we're going to have, that's going to rear its head. It's already doing it, but it's going to continue over the future, and it's going to be a difficult challenge to address.
Yeah. Well, when you guys are studying maps, landowners made contact with you, and y'all got a basic understanding of where you're going. When you're looking at maps, is there any one thing that you're looking for that kind of tells you how you were going to, I guess, think about moving forward for that landowner?
Topography would be one that I look at. And y'all know I'm down in the lower coastal plain, and we just don't have any on a lot of places. So if I get up about Montgomery, I'm happy. So we're in a lot of flat ground down here, but topography and then also the hydrology in the area, like Matt was talking about, that's driven by some of that topography. Not generally water limited in the southeast. I don't come along a lot of properties where we're just water limited. I don't see a lot of that, but topography drive a lot of stuff, especially with flora, uplands and bottomlands on the same property. You may be managing timber different ways, just based on the way the property's laid out and the topography on the property. Drive, some of your species that are going to be on that property just because of the topography.
Yep. Yeah.
What's one of the things I look at is what's on the neighbor properties. Are we an island of trees surrounded by ag? Are we do we have good mixed hardwood forest? Are we surrounded by pine? Are we pine? What's being provided especially on these smaller properties? You get to a property, 100, 200, 300 acres or smaller even, that what's on your neighboring properties is as important to directing what you need to do is what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's always my immediate thoughts is what's the limiting factor here. And like you said, it's much more important as you narrow the scope on smaller properties, but it is important on large properties too, especially if you've got a large expansive piece of ground that's limited in a number of different factors that you may need. We're working on one right now. It's a 1,300 acre tract in Coleman County, and man, it's a beautiful tract. Food, Matt knows this tract. Food is not the issue as far as food that's being produced on the property in a field setting. But what is limited is a food source outside of those fields. 1,300 acre tract's got 105 acres of food plots on it, but it really needs sunlight to the forest floor and food throughout the stands, and it just doesn't have that. And thereby it don't have any cover either. It has turned into a closed canopy situation.
And I generally evaluate smaller properties very similarly. I try to look at, if you look at the overall needs of deer or turkey, which are the two primary species that I'm dealing with, they cover large acreages, several hundred acres, sometimes tens of thousands of acres in the case of turkeys. So I try to look at, what are these species going to need at certain times of the year and what's being provided around this small property, because I want to provide on the small property what's not being provided elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike, anything different or?
No, I would agree with Matt on that. Food, water, cover, space. Sometimes space is limited, but you can sure provide that food and cover. And a lot of times I'll run into similar situations where it's just closed canopy forest, be it pine or hardwood, and just trying to figure out how to provide that year-round. You got hard mass, soft mass, woody browse, herbaceous forage. All that's outside of a food plot. And a lot of times what I've seen in my short time in business, y'all have been in business a lot longer than I have, but I don't have to talk people into planting food plots. I have to talk people into all right, let's manage some timber and burn some timber, depending on what it is. And like Matt said, thereby, providing what's limited on that property, by managing in that way and just going out there and looking, at providing year-round forage through doing that.
And another thing that's really been a limiting factor, I'm sure y'all are seeing it too, but in our timber markets in Northwest Alabama are basically not there. So it's extremely difficult to actively manage smaller tracts from a timber perspective because there's not much of a market.
Yeah.
Or you can't really get anybody to look at it. So, that's affecting our ability to actively manage tracts here.
Yeah. Pulpwood is, pine pulpwood is beginning to be a curse word just about everywhere, I think.
Well, hardwood's not a lot better in this part of the world.
We've got a couple outlets we can move a little bit of it, but it's slow. I was talking to a landowner of mine. We were talking timber, and one of my timber buyers I do a lot with, Will Shaver with Reynolds. Man, we got to talking about logging crews that we had done work with in the past, and I started my consulting business like we talked about in 19, and 75% of the loggers that have cut wood for me since I started are out of business.
I believe,
and that's a scary trend.
mm-hmm.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, and let's I want to narrow down the scope on a couple of things. We got on the food plots. I want to talk about those just a little bit. When it comes to managing food plots, I know that's not exactly what we're here for. We do that. We help people with it. But what do you guys need to make accurate recommendations on food plots that you generally don't have, or at least I don't get it? I'm trying to set y'all up here a little bit, just to see if most landowners are the same. But what are you asking for when you're trying to help folks develop a planning program?
Well, I can go a little bit. I guess the first step for me is, I try to explain to my landowners that the food plots are for you, not for the deer. Yeah. The food plots are for you. We're gonna try and make the majority of our land more productive than your food plots.
Right.
And then we're going to manage the habitat first, and then we're going to put that food plot out there for you, a good place to go kill something.
Shameless plug, habitat first.
Yeah. Shut up, Rob.
But that's kind of, as far, the way I typically try and plan stuff, we're going to plant something that's, especially on these larger properties, that's low maintenance, that's perennial. We can go in and no-till something in if we want to do something a little extra later. But typically some kind of clover, some mix of clovers, whatever. And then we can if we want to fill a gap, we can, or if we want to rotate in some different stuff, we can do that. But for the most part, I'm wanting to put that into old field management or some kind of a burn regime. If it's open ground, I want most of it in some kind of a old field management burn regime. And then we're going to stick a little 2 or 3 acre food plot in the middle of that 10 or 15 acre open system.
Would that change if you were doing the research that that we've all talked about, and you look around on the map and you've got no planted food sources around? Do you shift gears, or are you still gonna really treat, not as though they are an afterthought, but kind of they are? We're gonna still focus on the habitat and still only manage small kill plots, more or less.
I'm going to stick to the biologist answer of it depends, but but it really does. It depends on the size of the property. On a bigger property where we've got a lot to work with, let's go take a couple of big openings. Let's go plant soybeans, something like that.
Yeah.
But on these smaller properties, it's just the bang for the buck isn't there. And typically in my part of the world, if it's a smaller property, there's probably an ag field adjacent to it somewhere.
Gotcha.
And so it's, we're not really, especially in the east half of the state, there's ag everywhere. And so if we can provide that late summer, fall, that browse, that's where we can really get our late summer and fall, and then early spring. That's that's our critical times where we don't have a lot of food on the landscape.
Yeah. Mike, what do y'all grow down there? Sand spurs and yopon?
Yeah. Try to get people to grow perennial food plots for the same reason, lower maintenance, and really trying to get that habitat component. Because like I said earlier, I don't generally have to talk. People have already got some food plots, and it'll give us a reason to open things up. But like Andrew said, a lot of times my recommendation is if we're going to make a wildlife opening, let's not plan all of it. And so really trying to talk people into managing that native vegetation that brought everything to the show in the first place. You know what I mean? I talk to clients about that all the time. You know, when people started showing up and when people were writing about wildlife, when the country started, at the inception of people showing up, wildlife was seemingly an unlimited resource. And you could make an argument there was some slash and burn agriculture, but people sure weren't planting a lot of food plots and killing stuff over it. There was a lot of native vegetation. All the wildlife that we love now came to be on native vegetation. And there was plenty of them prior to anybody planting a soybean field. And so a lot of times I spend time trying to drill that into people's head, and then we can work on those perennial food plots that are lower maintenance, especially on a lot of smaller properties, which is what I'm working on currently, a good amount of smaller properties. Just getting that habitat component right for providing that year-round availability. If you have a food plot failure, not everything's leaving. You know what I mean?
Brock?
Yeah. Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I really try to get landowners to focus on managing herbaceous growth, and then using food plots as a supplement. And I too really push perennial clover. I generally try to get landowners to focus on managing herbaceous growth, whether it be legumes, forbs, the things that deer are going to be browsing on, insects. You know, I've often said if you're managing for insects, then you're managing for everything else. But as has already been stated, I use a lot of buffers around food plots with native herbaceous growth, not only for food, but for cover as well. And I do push and promote perennial clover plots simply because I run into situations where we have deer populations that are so high and so much browse pressure that planting soybeans, cowpeas, you know, any type of summer legume is pretty well not going to work. Even in some of the mixes, it just does not work. But clover does. You know, go ahead.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Another option that I have seen work really well is American joint vetch. It tends to do really well in drought conditions, and it also withstands heavy grazing pressure and bounces right back. So I think that's a good option for summer.
And we, your buddy Blair up there at Rival, he got me in. I don't know how many bags we ended up going with, but I ordered several 50-pound bags of American joint vetch and our local cultivar of partridge pea.
There you go.
So we're gonna supplement some stuff as soon as we can get some burns, some summertime burns going. You know, we're just gonna let the fire scarify the ground, and we're going to put out just little patches of that. We'll let wildlife, birds, and insects do the rest. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing before we move on to another topic. I think that the average hunter doesn't understand the importance of native vegetation. Most of them, when I get to talking about managing for, you know, understory vegetation, I'm not going to say it's the first time they've ever heard it, but they put so much emphasis on other things that they've kind of ignored that for a long time. And you can completely transform a property by managing the herbaceous growth that's there.
Well, I was kind of headed that direction. One, I don't think hunters and even some land managers understand the fact that the native vegetation is suited and adapted to grow in that location, in the soil conditions that are there naturally. And you may be planting a soybean or some other type of clover cultivar that requires a much more, I will.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to talk about too, Matt, you're talking about native vegetation and managing for insects. Your insect species richness is going to go down on non-native vegetation. Just because people also, this is another term, plant secondary compounds, you're not going to have native insects on non-native plants because they're not adapted to certain plant secondary compounds. And so native plants are inherently going to have more insects on them. And so when you talk about managing at the insect level, native vegetation is where you're going to have your insects because, X insect may not be adapted to, I'll just say one that everybody hates, Chinese privet. Your insect species richness will fall outside of non-native vegetation or outside of native vegetation. So that's something to consider. There's these ecosystem level impacts that happen when you don't have native forage available or native herbaceous plant communities available. And it's a deep level when we talk about native versus non-native. At an ecosystem landscape level, it becomes a problem. And so we're talking about managing single properties, but go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that if you look at the diversity in beetles and grasshoppers and moths and butterflies, a lot of those species are adapted to relying on only certain species of native plants for their reproductive and life cycles. So if you replace all that with a cultivar of something that's, a monoculture of, you just take your pick, then you're removing those species from the landscape. At least you're removing the requirements that they need to fulfill their life cycle.
Do I sound better?
Yes.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good deal. So y'all carry on. I'll jump back in.
Well, I think, Jeremy, we were just talking about how, and Mike brought it up, how insects rely heavily and have adapted specifically to our native herbaceous plants that are native to the
absolutely
areas.
And I think part of kind of where I was going with that before my camera so rudely messed up is I think the industry being so driven by hunting and harvest that we're playing catch up in the management science side of things as far as getting the good information out there. I think that's changing. I think it's changing quickly. I think the thirst for better understanding is out there. But I also think because, it is what it is, but because social media gives everybody a platform, that some of these biggest sounding boards out there really got no idea what they're talking about. And they're pushing, seed from a bag that they get paid, some type of sponsorship or some type of monetary gain to sell. And look, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We're in the same boat. We have sponsorships. But I think there's going to come a point that those two are going to have to be on a level playing field versus proper management competing with the business side of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's going to change. Look, everything's driven by money, so it is what it is.
Like I tell my landowners, it costs a lot of money to try and outcompete Mother Nature.
Absolutely. and I'm fighting it myself. I've got that tract down there, Marshall County on the river. We just planted 20 acres of soybeans. Second time we've planted it because deer wiped us out the first time. It got too wet for us to be able to either spread Milorganite or spray Trico to try to repel deer out of it for a little while. But our biggest issue right now, I think I mentioned earlier, is and it may be before we were recording, is we've got such a stand of Cerisa coming on that place that I'm having to change what we're doing. I'm gonna have to rely on supplemental food sources for a little while until I can get that Cerisa controlled. Because there's just no real good way for us to select it out of the native habitat.
Yep.
We're just gonna have to knock everything on the head, and then try to build it back, from ground zero after nuking the place.
Yeah, it's telling that a lot of times with management, when we're making a plan, a lot of it has to do with killing non-native species.
Yeah.
Name it Bahia down here.
And I don't think landowners understand it very well.
Yeah, I mean, they like, what, you want to kill this 30-acre field of Bahia grass that I can hay? But it's between you and your wildlife management objectives to have these non-native mat-forming grasses, and you can roll that over into privet, anything, China berry, just Chinese tallow, stuff I run into down here a lot, that you can have almost a monoculture of Chinese tallow in wet areas. I run into stuff like that. And so it's like we've been talking about, it's telling that a lot of times when you get a management plan from one of us or another biologist, that a lot of that will be surrounded with herbicide application to kill non-native species, just so we can get that native seed bank to come back, and how beneficial that is.
That's right.
That we think it's worth spending money to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's what sets folks like you guys apart from maybe other folks in the industry without the background in wildlife and forest education. Look, unfortunately you got to have some of the academia side of it. Now there's good guys out there that manage just from school of hard knocks, but they have developed that knowledge base over many, many years. And it's not just because they, killed a big deer or something like that. They're not going to be coming in and writing you a plan that tells you to increase the number of feeders per square mile and work on your bedding. You know what I mean?
You wanna blow a landowner's mind? Tell him what when they ask you what can I do different? Well, let's make these feeders disappear.
Yeah.
Let's
take that feed
number
bill
one
and make
thing you
it
can do.
zero.
Yeah, if we can lose the reliance on supplemental feed, then we have done our job.
Yeah. And I think that's almost completely foreign in today's world. I think everybody feels like they have to have feeders. They have to be putting out these minerals that are, $30 to $50 a bag or whatever. And while some of those can have a very minor impact, I would say by and large, that's where the most money in the industry is spent on trying to put little Band-Aids on great big hemorrhaging problems. But one thing that this don't just go for, and this don't just go for food plots. This is everything. One of the things that I feel like is just almost non-existent, except for folks that have land managers that are full-time and or consultants that are on their property often, is records. I don't feel like your average guy out there is is sitting down, and when it, say food plots, they're not taking notes on what their pH was when they started, how many tons of lime they put out, what seed blend they did, what kind of rainfall they got, and how things performed. And then if it doesn't perform, what did you do different the next year? I mean, that goes from deer harvest to timber management to fire rotation, the whole nine. Oftentimes I feel like we show up and you can tell there's been a lot done. They just don't have any idea what to tell you was done when it was done.
Yeah.
And that's hard for us. You just kind of got to guess, or it is for me. When I'm playing a guessing game on how things have been done and when they were done, sometimes it can get you in a bad light with a landowner when he tried something that failed, 2 years ago, but he's got no notes. And then you turn around and say, well, I don't know exactly what you've been doing, but let's try this. When you know what they've been doing and you can kind of go down the list and go, okay, well, I see why we are where we are. Now let's adjust. So I think good record keeping is paramount to being successful.
And you're talking about that, in a plan, everything you do should have a purpose. We're not just going out there to do something. Everything that is prescribed, everything that you do should have a purpose, not just going out willy nilly.
Yeah. You're not looking for billable hours.
Right. Yep. And I run into that a lot with people that are applying for cost share assistance through the NRCS. And I explain to them up front, I'm not going to add a practice into your plan just to get more money. It's going to have to help serve one of your objectives. And if it don't serve one of those objectives, then we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to, now go ahead, Mike.
No, I mean, a lot of these practices, to be totally honest with you, some of these practices we implement are not cheap, and they're a commitment. And I know a lot of consultants out there, I'm not going to ask you to spend money that I wouldn't spend. And so when I ask somebody to spend, some of these are, X amount of dollars, not cheap, it's definitely serving a purpose. Like herbicide application, prescribed fire rotation. When you extrapolate that over years and years and years, it's a commitment. And so that's just something I was thinking about while we were talking about
that. Especially with invasive species. I mean, if you're gonna dedicate the money and go put $200+ an acre to tackle, some kind of like China berry, privet, you better be ready to make the next treatment, because it's going to come back. The seed bank's there. So if you're not committed to be able to make that second and third treatment, fourth treatment if it's needed, you're wasting your money on the first treatment. There's no need in doing it.
Yeah, we're doing a development project now in Shelby County. It's on a relatively small tract. It's I think 440 acres. But we're going to be spending a big chunk of money this year on having a hack and squirt / backpack crew come through on 135, 140 acres that we just thinned this past winter. So, obviously, you guys know what a fresh thin looks like, but we've got hardwood competition coming back up from all the stump sprouts. And in the pine plantation, you've got your typical hardwood species jumping up because we've disturbed the soil. But that's in a particular county that our burn window is a pain in the butt. So we're not always going to be able to just light a fire and handle all this stuff. So I sat down and talked with our landowner and said, look, could we handle all this with fire? Possibly. But if we miss the window because of weather, and because it's got a burn ban half the year,
I think our safe bet is to put chemical out and just make sure that we start out on the right foot and not always playing from behind. And sometimes you just have to do that. But it's kind of like you said, it's an investment and it's got a purpose. A lot of people sit back and think how expensive planting their food plots are. That's, $300 or $400, $500 an acre, depending on what you're actually trying to do and what seed you're buying, that type of thing. We may be spending, $150, $200 an acre on really, really big timber stands. So that can be a significant investment for folks. What else? You guys, getting down to kind of the end of the show here, but if you had to give, a last little tidbit for folks that were thinking about calling you guys, to help develop a plan, what advice would you give them, before making that call to you? What would you want them to be prepared to do, prepared to talk about when they called you the first time?
I request pretty specific objectives. We've talked about deer, we've talked about turkey. It's a lot easier for me to make recommendations and manage a property when you have very clear objectives rather than, hey, I want my deer herd to improve. Okay, well, how do you want it to improve? You want to hire, an older age class? Or are you wanting better antler development? You wanting heavier body weights? You want more opportunity for your kids, and what specifically are you looking for? So be as specific as you can possibly be.
Yeah. Andrew?
I think that's, the more information a landowner can give you on what they're willing to do, what are we willing to, and this is for, more in depth, but what are you willing to invest in this property?
Yeah.
Are, is doing timber sales okay with you? Because that's, a big part of, a lot of times, not only can we get the habitat benefits from a timber sale, but we can also pay for a lot of the management actions that we're trying to achieve there. So it's a lot of times when I'm building a plan, I'm looking at, how much income are we going to generate? And then you can kind of base some of that off of some of your recommendations as far as treatments and expenses based on the income that you're going to generate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I try to really stress that to my landowners, because there's very few that don't need to cut timber. But when you start throwing around, these numbers for management on a nice size tract, what it's going to cost on an annual basis, and sometimes having some really big expenditures, eyeballs get big. But then when you turn around and say, but, you're 3 years from a sizable timber sale, at that point we can generate $200,000, and then we can put that back in the coffers for this property, and it'll pay for everything we've done to that point. Plus you'll have capital moving forward if you need it.
And if we can time those timber sales and those costly treatments, time them just right, we can use those as tax write-offs for the capital gains on the timber income.
That's right.
You're kind of, it's way more deep into the weeds of the management plan, and not something I think about first, but it is something that I feel like a good management plan should take into account.
Absolutely.
And to help your landowner work through those processes.
Yeah. And of course this is outside my wheelhouse, but I always recommend, especially these guys that have big properties, they need to loop in their CPA, whoever's doing their accounting, into what all's going on that property.
Mike?
Yeah, I would be a broken record if I repeated Matt and Andrew, but something else I could think of on top of what they said would be just be open to a suggestion if you're going to call a consultant that you may not necessarily have heard before, like the feeders thing we talk about. And I could talk about that. You could do a whole episode on feeders, and the cost of having feeder on the landscape. But it may be that somebody comes in there and tells you to put away with something that you're really tied to. So just be prepared when you call a consultant to consider what they have to say and potentially implement something that you may be a little bit afraid to do, like putting them feeders up with some management plans. And doing some management I run into people all the time that are a little bit scared of fire, and that's something that I've seen before.
Oh, yeah.
People are a little bit afraid of fire. So there's a lot of stuff that you may get if you get a management plan from one of us or another consultant that you may be a little uncomfortable with, but just be open to listening to it and be open to having a conversation about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the top ones on my list is when you're talking about that, doing things that's uncomfortable for you, killing deer is really high on that list with some of my clients. They're like, well, we're doing all this to have deer. And I said, yeah, well, to continue to have the kind of deer that you want to have or you do have, you're going to have to start pulling the trigger a whole lot more than you are now. And we're fighting that on numerous properties to the point of, they're having to fence fields and spread Milorganite and spray trico and just try to get some of their fields to make it. These guys are wanting to have some nice dove hunts, and it's tough because they don't shoot enough deer.
Well, I've run into the same thing, and Jeremy, you're familiar with some of the properties as well. Once you improve the habitat to a certain point and you've got, X amount more bedding cover, fawn rearing cover, browse available, and you improve the fawn recruitment, the better the habitat gets, the more you have to pull the trigger, or you're going to lose all the gains that you've made.
That's right.
Yeah, and that stuff turns into work.
It does.
Yeah, it turns into work, And I know Jeremy and Matt and Andrew, maybe in your past, pulling the trigger has been a job, but I promise you, when you do it enough, it turns into work, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that when you ask them to shoot X amount of does, they're like, golly, that's a lot of skinning, or a lot of, work goes into that. They just get tired of shooting. And that, that's with other stuff on property management as well. It turns into work eventually if you want it done right. So that's something to think about also.
It's not something you can let up on, because the better habitat you have, the fewer deer you have, the more they're going to twin and occasionally triplet. And so the more you kill, it seems like the more you got to kill.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we got landowners.
That's one of the other
Yeah. I'm sorry. I keep stepping on it.
Yeah. No, all good. But that's one of the other uncomfortable situations when you've got landowners. I mean, look, most of these guys that we work for are high net worth individuals. They're successful at whatever they are, whatever they do for a living, and that's what they need to be doing, to keep everything going. But they're not on their properties a lot of times, and somebody's got to shoot deer. And that uncomfortable conversation of, hey, you're going to have to let somebody pull the trigger out here, even if it's, it's going to have to be somebody other than you. And you're going to have to figure that out. And sometimes it takes people a long time to cross that bridge. And some people never will, but I find most people eventually do, because they start punching numbers and figure out how much they've invested in that track, and they don't want to go backwards.
That's right.
And one other thing that I wanted to bring up earlier, as far as, management plans and talking to the landowner, there's a lot of stuff we can tell by going back and as far as the history of a stand. that we can go back and look at historical imagery and we can kind of piece together what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can have, and I know sometimes it's a new landowner and you don't have the history, but if you've got the history of the stand, that is a huge benefit to us to know what we're diving into and to help with the plan so that we know what we're looking for. Was this stand clear cut 20 years ago? Was this stand thin? Are we a third rotation thinning? Or have we not had any treatment in the last 40 years? So the history of the stand is a huge part of what we can do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, guys, I appreciate it. I think we've covered the bases pretty well. Do y'all want to add anything to the end? Another topic that you think we should have covered, I didn't? What? I guess not. Well, okay. Well, fellas, I appreciate it. I enjoyed talking with you guys and hopefully catch up with you guys again here in the next couple, 3 weeks. For all of you that's out there watching, slide on over to thehabitatnetwork.com. You can grab Mike and Andrew and Matt's information if you have questions. Reach out to them. You can get on the Facebook group and ask questions. We're fairly responsive. One thing I want people to keep in mind is that we are in the field almost on a daily basis. A lot of times that takes us out of good service areas. And most of us, even when we're at home, probably don't live in good service areas. Us wildlife and forestry people don't tend to be extroverts. we like to be out in the boonies by ourselves. So, reach out to us and don't be surprised if it takes 2 or 3 days to get a response. We do live outside, and there's some things that come along with that. But fellas, I appreciate it. I'll let you guys go, and y'all have a good evening, and we'll catch you later. Y'all
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
I'm going